She only wanted to know why the printer was making strange noises. But what she discovered jammed inside changed everything and saved a millionaire CEO from losing it all. She was a cleaner. He was a powerful executive. What connected them? One broken machine, one forgotten document, and a secret someone desperately wanted to bury. The city was just beginning to stir, wrapped in a gray-blue haze of early morning light. Outside the gleaming glass tower of Alton Dynamics, steam curled up from the grates in the sidewalk as delivery trucks rolled past, and the first wave of professionals began to filter into the heart of Manhattan. Inside the building, however, it was still quiet. The offices had not yet filled with the chatter of meetings or the hum of machines. At this hour, the only sounds came from soft footsteps, the swish of mops, and the occasional distant echo of a vacuum cleaner. Lily Gomez knelt down on the smooth tile floor of the executive conference room, wiping away a splash of spilled coffee beneath a sleek modern table that likely cost more than her entire month's salary. She wore the standard navy gray janitor's uniform with the stitched-on name patch that read, L. Gomez. Her dark hair was tied back in a low bun, and though her body moved from muscle memory, her eyes were alert, scanning, sharp. It wasn't just her. Sitting in the corner on a chair too big for her little legs was her daughter Rose. 7 years old and full of questions, Rose wore her favorite light pink dress with lace trim. In her lap was a sketchbook covered in hearts, robots, and colorful equations that didn't quite make sense yet, but almost did. Her curiosity was limitless, and she liked watching her mother work. "Mom," Rose whispered, "why do rich people always drink coffee and never finish it?" Lily smiled without looking up. "Because they're too busy talking to drink it." Rose looked unimpressed by the answer, then turned her attention to the big black machine humming softly in the corner, a high-speed office printer. It blinked with an angry red light, screen flashing. Error. Paper jam. Access denied. Network conflict. "Mom," Rose said again, this time more urgently. "The printer's crying." Lily glanced up. "What?" "It's blinking red like it's upset." "Look," Rose pointed. Lily set down her cloth and walked over to the machine, wiping her hands on her uniform. The screen was filled with flashing text and code, but it was the way the printer had seemingly stopped mid-process, frozen as if trying to speak, that made her pause. She tapped a few buttons and opened the paper tray. Inside, jammed and crumpled, was a single page. She carefully pulled it free, trying not to tear it. At first glance, the page looked like a technical report. Dense lines of system commands, file directories, and server pathways. But one thing stood out. At the bottom, faint but legible, was a digital signature. Jason A. Cole, the CEO. Lily's eyebrows lifted. She looked over her shoulder to make sure no one was around. She wasn't supposed to read documents left in machines. Technically, she wasn't even supposed to touch them. But something about the urgency of the printer's error and the way this page had been abandoned halfway through gave her pause. She folded the paper and tucked it into the inside pocket of her cleaning jacket. She wasn't sure why she did it. Just instinct. Maybe it was nothing. But she'd learned the hard way in life. Sometimes the smallest details mattered the most. Rose tilted her head. "Is the printer okay now?" "I think so," Lily said quietly, "but I'm not sure what it was trying to say." As she gathered her supplies to move to the next floor, she glanced one last time at the now silent printer. It no longer flashed or beeped. It had said what it needed to say, to the one person in the building who no one expected to listen. And that, though Lily didn't know it yet, was the moment everything started to change. The morning rhythm of Alton Dynamics was beginning to take shape. The glass doors on the first floor whooshed open and shut with increasing frequency as employees began arriving, swiping their ID badges, exchanging polite greetings, and heading to their respective floors. The mood, as always, was professional, orderly, ambitious, and buzzing quietly with the energy of deadlines and ambition. From her vantage point near the elevator bay, Lily moved carefully, pushing her cleaning cart past the marble pillars with practiced ease. Rose now sat cross-legged beside the reception desk, engrossed in her sketchbook, drawing a robot cat with laser eyes. Lily had already cleaned most of the 24th floor, and she was heading down to the basement supply room when the elevator doors opened, and he walked in. Jason A. Cole. Lily saw him before most others even noticed. It was hard not to. He stood out the way a movie star might in a grocery store. Not because he tried to, in fact, he didn't speak loudly, didn't seek attention, but because presence like his didn't go unnoticed. He wore a navy blue suit, tailored to fit his tall, athletic frame with perfect ease. His dark brown hair was neatly swept back, and his eyes, deep, observant, and the color of strong coffee, scanned the room with calm precision. Despite his reputation, he didn't walk like a man who enjoyed being above others. There was no arrogance in his step, no air of superiority. If anything, there was a weariness to him this morning, something in the tight line of his jaw and the stiffness in his shoulders. Still, when he nodded at the receptionist and murmured a courteous, "Good morning," it was genuine. 3 senior executives trailed after him, talking among themselves in hushed voices, papers clutched in their hands. They entered the elevator with him, and the doors closed. Lily stared for a second longer than she meant to, her hand resting on the cart handle. She had seen Jason before, of course. He was famously private, rarely gave interviews, and often refused public appearances unless absolutely necessary. But he always came to the office, no matter the storm outside or the pressures within. Some called him intense, others called him brilliant. Lily had once overheard a junior developer whisper to a colleague that Jason could spot a lie faster than a lie could finish being told. She didn't know the man, but she had always found something different in the way he moved through a space, like he was constantly calculating something just behind his gaze. She glanced around. Most employees barely acknowledged his presence, some out of reverence, others out of nerves. The closer people were to the top, the more carefully they watched their behavior around him. His approval wasn't given easily, but once earned, it was worth gold. As Lily turned her cart to leave, she saw something else that made her pause. 2 security guards, usually stationed quietly near the side exit, were now standing together in tense conversation, glancing occasionally at the elevator dashboard. One of them tapped his earpiece and nodded grimly. Then a black town car pulled up outside. Lily knew the logo on the license plate. It belonged to the private fleet used by the board of directors. They weren't scheduled to be here today. She stopped walking. Within moments, 3 sharply dressed men in dark suits and polished shoes walked through the lobby. Their expressions were cold and serious, briefcases in hand. Not the kind of look that came with casual check-ins or friendly investor tours. Lily's chest tightened. She felt a flicker of something in her gut. Instinct. It was the same instinct that had made her pick up that jammed piece of paper instead of throwing it away. She looked back toward the now quiet printer room on the 24th floor. The file she had pulled, it had Jason Cole's name on it. But the details, the access logs, the technical jargon, suggested something more complicated. Something that didn't feel like the behavior of someone trying to hide. If anything, it felt like someone trying to warn. She looked down at her daughter, still drawing peacefully, unaware of the sudden shift in the air around them. Lily had seen enough in life to know what trouble felt like. And this felt like trouble. Except, this time, maybe she had seen it early enough. She turned and walked quickly to her locker, the folded page still hidden deep in her uniform jacket. She hadn't looked at it closely. Not yet. She hadn't dared. But maybe now, she needed to. The tension inside Alton Dynamics spread like a cold front sweeping through glass hallways. It didn't arrive with an announcement. There were no alarms, no raised voices, but everyone could feel it. A shift in the atmosphere. Conversations became shorter. Eyes darted more. Doors that were usually kept open were now shut. Senior managers began whispering in corners or disappearing behind frosted glass conference rooms. Something was happening, and it was happening at the top. Lily felt it even before the whispers began. She had worked in enough offices, cleaned enough late-night boardrooms, and overheard enough half-finished conversations to know when a company was being pulled into crisis. People walked differently when they were nervous. They checked their phones more. They avoided eye contact. That's how it started. Around 11 a.m., Lily and Rose were cleaning on the 18th floor when it happened. The company's internal news feed, usually a calm stream of press clippings, HR updates, and birthday shout-outs, suddenly displayed a flashing red banner across the lobby screens. Breaking, CEO Jason Cole under internal review for financial irregularities. Sources claim potential data suppression involving $10 million in contracts. Gasps echoed in the open workspace. Phones came out. Someone said, "Oh my God," under their breath. A junior developer dropped his coffee. Lily froze. The image on the screen showed Jason's face, a cropped headshot from a tech conference years ago. Clean-shaven, focused, confident. The headline beneath it made her stomach twist. She looked down at Rose, who had stopped drawing and was staring up at the screen. Her small hand reached for Lily's. A few moments later, one of the VP assistants walked quickly past them, talking into her phone. "They're suspending him. Board's forcing an emergency session. This is bad. Like, real bad." Lily's thoughts were already spinning. Her hand went to her jacket pocket, the one where she had tucked that crumpled sheet from the printer. Her fingers curled around the folded paper, and her heart began to race. She remembered the words she had glimpsed when she pulled it out. Technical terms, security credentials, an internal report of access logs, and the signature at the bottom, Jason Acole. The strange part, it hadn't looked like a cover-up. If anything, the document read like a disclosure. Like someone trying to show that unauthorized access had occurred under their credentials. Not by them, but through them. Had Jason tried to report something? Had someone stopped that report from going through? She moved quickly down the hallway, pulling her cart behind her, eyes lowered as people rushed by. Everyone was too distracted to notice her, as usual. As she turned the corner toward the service stairwell, she heard two executives speaking near the coffee machine. "They'll make an example of him," one said. "Board's been waiting for this," the other replied. "Too much control in one man's hands. They'll force him out before lunch." Lily's pulse pounded in her ears. She didn't know Jason. Not really. She had never had a conversation with him. But she had watched him from a distance. Seen how he listened in meetings, how he stayed late alone on the top floor, how he once handed a tissue to a crying intern outside HR without saying a word. He didn't look like a man who manipulated people for money. She ducked into the janitorial closet, pulled the door shut, and exhaled. Her hands shook as she pulled the page from her pocket and unfolded it. It was dense, filled with technical language she didn't fully understand. But parts stood out clearly now that she really looked. Unauthorized access attempt detected. External IP mapped to internal testing credentials. Report generated, 318. ADM Col-J, Level 7 access. Export attempt failed. Print queue corrupted, manual override suggested. It was a report. Not a deleted one, not hidden, but blocked. Whoever accessed Jason's credentials had done it from the inside, from a shadow network within the company, and Jason had tried to document it. But when he tried to print the report, the printer jammed. Or maybe someone made sure it jammed. And that one attempt, that failed print job, might have been the only thing standing between him and being destroyed. Lily stared at the bottom of the paper again. It wasn't forged. It wasn't vague. It had a full digital signature trace. Her mind raced. If the board didn't see this, Jason would be forced out for a crime he didn't commit. Someone was framing him, and doing it well. She glanced at her phone. The time, 11:24 a.m. If the rumors were right, the boardroom meeting would start at noon. She had 30 minutes, maybe less, and she was just a janitor, a nobody, a woman most executives passed in the hall without a second glance. But she had something no one else did, the truth, and she couldn't stay silent. Not this time. Lily stood in the janitor's closet, the document trembling in her hand. Her heart pounding loud enough she swore she could hear it echo off the metal shelves. The air in the small space smelled like disinfectant and dust, but all she could focus on was the paper. This strange, crucial, half-printed report that shouldn't have existed, and yet did. Jason Cole, the man now being publicly accused of covering up $10 million worth of financial irregularities, had tried to print this exact document just days ago. A document that, if read properly, didn't implicate him at all. In fact, it cleared him. Whoever had framed him had used his credentials, and this report was the proof. Her mind raced through the headlines, the whispers in the hallways, the panic in the executive floor. Jason was hours, maybe minutes, away from being sacrificed to protect the company's image. She had something that could stop it. But how would anyone listen to her? She looked down at her uniform. El Gomez was stitched neatly across the chest, a name so often ignored, a role meant to be invisible. But then she heard Rose's voice from earlier that morning echo in her mind. Maybe the printer's scared to tell the truth, or maybe it had been screaming for someone to notice. And she had. Lily pulled her phone from her pocket and snapped a photo of the document, both sides, in case someone tried to take it away. She texted the images to her own email, then to a second backup account she'd made years ago when she first moved to the city. Just in case. She took a breath, folded the paper carefully, and stepped out of the closet. The building felt different now. People walked quickly, shoulders hunched, talking in short bursts. Screens blinked with headlines. One news ticker in the reception area now read, "Alton CEO silent amidst mounting pressure." She knew where she had to go. The 30th floor, the executive boardroom. She moved with purpose, but not so fast that she'd be stopped. The uniform was a cloak of invisibility, and today she used it to her advantage. As she entered the elevator, a junior assistant stepped in beside her, eyes glued to her phone. She didn't even glance at Lily. That was the secret. Everyone looked past the people in the background, the cleaners, the mailroom guys, the night staff. They were there, but never seen. The elevator rose floor by floor, soft music playing overhead. Lily's fingers clenched tighter around the paper in her pocket. What was she going to do? Walk into the boardroom and shout? Hand a piece of paper to a room full of millionaires and lawyers and hope they listened? It sounded insane, and yet the thought of doing nothing made her feel even sicker. When the elevator opened on the 30th floor, the hallway was eerily quiet. Thick carpet muffled her steps. Through a frosted glass wall, she saw the silhouettes of executives gathered around a massive table. Someone was already speaking. A voice carried low but firm. Jason wasn't in sight. She looked around. Security was stationed near the main entrance to the boardroom. No way she could just walk in unnoticed. Then another idea struck her. She turned down the hall and slipped into the executive printing suite, a private room connected to the boardroom, used for confidential documents. She had cleaned it a dozen times before. It shared a connecting door with the boardroom. Rarely used but not locked. Heart pounding, Lily crept into the suite, closed the door behind her, and pressed her ear to the wood. Otterin, his credentials were used multiple times in the last 6 months, a man was saying. Whether he knew or not, it's a liability. The press is tearing us apart. We need to act decisively. Another voice chimed in. Is he even here to defend himself? Hiding won't help his case. And then a new voice, deeper, cooler. He's waiting downstairs. I thought it best to handle the discussion first. They were deciding his fate without him even in the room. Lily's palms were sweating now. Her breath came in shallow bursts. And then, without letting herself hesitate a second longer, she opened the small side door and stepped inside. Every head in the room turned. For one long, excruciating second, no one said a word. Lily felt their shock hit her like heat. A woman in a janitor's uniform, standing in the middle of a corporate war room. Who? A board member started. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said clearly, loudly, before anyone else could speak. But you're about to ruin the life of an innocent man. The room stirred. Someone stood. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an executive. I'm the person who cleans your floors. And I saw something you didn't. She pulled the folded sheet from her pocket and held it up. This document was stuck in the printer on the 24th floor 2 days ago. It never went through. It's a report, a warning, and it was signed by Jason Cole. There was a murmur. Someone reached for their phone. Another stood and walked toward her, hand extended. She handed over the page. And as the silence fell again, Lily added, voice unwavering, You don't have to believe me. Just read it. But don't pretend you're making the right decision without the full truth. She turned to leave. And as she stepped out of the boardroom, her pulse still hammering, she heard one of the executives say in a low, stunned voice, This changes everything. Lily stepped out of the boardroom with her head held high, but her body was shaking. Her palms were damp, her legs felt weak, and her stomach churned with a swirl of adrenaline and disbelief. She had just walked into a place no one like her was ever meant to enter. Not to clean, not to speak, and certainly not to challenge the very people who ran the company. But she had done it. She pushed through the hallway doors, back into the executive printing suite, where the air was still and heavy. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, she leaned against the wall and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Her hands went to her face, covering it for a moment. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Her mind kept flashing with images from just moments earlier. The board members' stunned faces, the tight line in one man's jaw when she said the words innocent man, and the silence that followed when she placed the paper in their hands. It was done. At least her part was. But what would they do with it? Would they even believe her? Or would they tear it up and go on with their decision, hiding the truth because it was inconvenient? 1,000 doubts crept in, each one sharper than the last. She turned to leave, reaching for the handle, but froze. The door was already opening, and standing on the other side of it was Jason Cole. He was alone. No entourage. No lawyers. No board members trailing behind. Just him. Tall, calm, collected. But his eyes were anything but calm. They searched her face for answers, for clues, for something. "Miss Gomez," he said softly. She blinked. "You know my name?" His expression tightened slightly. "I know everyone's name in this building, or at least I try to." There was no smugness in his voice, no performance, just quiet sincerity. She started, then stopped. Jason stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "I just came from the boardroom." Her heart sank. They didn't believe me, did they? He studied her for a moment before answering. They read every word. She swallowed hard, bracing herself. "And it was enough," he said. "It was exactly enough." Lily's breath caught. "They stopped the vote?" "They stopped everything. An internal audit has been triggered. They've already suspended 2 network administrators pending investigation. They're digging into every security breach we've had over the last year." Her knees almost gave out beneath her. She grabbed the edge of the printer for balance. Jason stepped closer. "That document you found, it's what I tried to send 3 days ago. I didn't know it never printed. The system glitched right as I hit send, and I had to leave for a shareholder call. I thought I'd resend it later, but..." He shook his head. "Turns out someone made sure it never reached the board." "They used your login," Lily said quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, I know who it was, or I have a strong guess. But now we'll find proof. Because of you." She looked up at him then, really looked, and saw something unexpected. He wasn't just relieved. He looked humbled, grateful in a way that ran deeper than just saving face or keeping his title. "You didn't have to step in," he added. "You could have walked past that printer like everyone else. You could have said nothing." Lily's voice was quiet but steady. "I've walked past too many things in life that didn't feel right. I wasn't going to do it again." Jason stared at her, and a faint smile touched his lips. Not performative, not polite. Real. Rose appeared in the doorway a second later, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hands smudged with colored pencil. She looked between them, sensing the tension, then skipped over to Lily and took her hand. "This is my mom," she told Jason matter-of-factly. "She's smarter than she looks." Jason knelt slightly to Rose's level, his tone softening. "I believe that. She just saved a lot of people's futures today." Rose gave a proud nod, as if that was exactly what she expected her mother to do. Jason stood again. "Miss Gomez, Lily, I know this might sound unusual, but I'd like to speak with you properly. Not as the CEO of this company, and not as someone giving out corporate favors. Just as a man who owes you far more than I can say." "I don't need anything," she said reflexively. "I'm not offering charity," he replied. "I'm offering opportunity. Because I think you're the kind of person who sees more than what's on the surface. And this company could use more people like that." She didn't answer immediately. Not because she didn't believe him, but because for the first time in years someone had looked at her, really looked, and seen something other than a uniform and a broom. "Let me think about it," she said finally. He nodded, accepting that answer. "When you're ready." As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back. "Thank you, Lily, for everything." And then he disappeared through the door, leaving her standing with Rose in the soft glow of the printer room. The same room where everything had changed, not because of power or status, but because one woman had the courage to ask a question no one else had. "Why is the printer crying?" The news spread through Alton Dynamics like wildfire. By the next morning, the atmosphere in the building had transformed from tension and paranoia to a stunned, almost reverent hush. People walked slower, glanced sideways at one another, whispered over coffee machines. Everyone had heard what happened. that the CEO hadn't been taken down in disgrace, that the accusations had collapsed under scrutiny, and that an internal cover-up had been exposed. But what truly had everyone in a state of disbelief was the part no one had expected. The person who saved him wasn't another executive, wasn't a board member or a high-paid lawyer. It was the woman in the janitor's uniform, the one they had passed every morning without a second thought. Lily. Her name was now spoken in hushed tones by people who had never once said it before. Suddenly, her schedule was interrupted by people stopping her in the halls. Some offered polite thanks. Others looked embarrassed, like they were realizing, too late, just how invisible they'd treated her. But Lily didn't linger in that attention. She wasn't chasing praise. In truth, she barely slept the night after the boardroom incident. Her mind was still trying to make sense of everything, and something still wasn't sitting right. She had done her part. The document she'd found proved that Jason had been framed, but she kept turning over the technical terms in that report, details she only partially understood, and the way the printer had jammed exactly at the moment that file had been sent. She had seen enough systems go haywire in this building to know the difference between coincidence and sabotage. The deeper truth? Someone hadn't just tried to frame Jason. Someone inside the building had actively tried to make sure the report never reached the board. That wasn't clumsy fraud. That was a deliberate obstruction. Lily returned to the 24th floor printer room early that morning before her shift officially began. She stood in front of the machine that had, in its own way, cried for help. The same printer that had failed, or had been made to fail. She opened the logs manually. She'd learned how to do it from one of the IT techs she used to chat with at night. She scanned the queue. It had been cleared, wiped clean, except for one detail. A ghosted line. Job failed, access conflict, user override, IT admin, proxy. Her heart skipped. User override? She took a photo, then another. She didn't know what to do with it yet, but she wasn't letting it disappear. That afternoon, she received an unexpected message, a meeting request, from Jason Cole. He hadn't seen her since that moment in the printer room. Lily wasn't sure what to expect, but she accepted the invite. When she arrived at the top floor, the receptionist greeted her by name. That alone felt surreal. Then she was escorted to a side office. Not the intimidating glass-walled CEO office at the end of the hall, but a warm minimalist space with a single plant, bookshelves, and a large wooden desk. Jason was already there, standing by the window. He turned when she entered, and for a moment, he looked almost relieved to see her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure I should." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." He gestured for her to sit and took the seat across from her. "I wanted to speak with you face to face," he began. "Not about what you did, though I'll never stop being grateful, but about what comes next." Lily hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you don't belong in the background," he said. "You see things no one else does. You think like someone who understands systems, not just machines, but people, patterns, intentions. That's rare." She stayed silent, unsure if he was offering praise or trying to recruit her into something she couldn't yet define. He went on. "I've spoken with our infrastructure director. We're opening a new department, a hybrid team between internal operations and cyber oversight. I want you on that team, not because you saved me, but because you see what others miss, and you act." Lily's throat tightened. Part of her, the part that had grown used to surviving, to hiding behind safe routines and anonymity, wanted to say no, wanted to retreat. But another part, the one that had stepped into that boardroom, the one that had asked why the printer was crying, that part knew it was time. "I don't have a degree," she said. "I don't care," Jason replied immediately. "You have something better. Instinct, integrity." "I'm still a cleaner," she added. "Not anymore." Lily looked at him for a long moment, searching for any trace of pity, of condescension. She found none. Instead, she found something else. Belief. Real, honest belief. A few hours later, as she walked through the building with her new badge in hand, not blue like the staff, but white, marked Operations Analyst, provisional, people looked at her differently. Not with awe, not with awkwardness, but with curiosity, respect. And while her old uniform still hung in the locker on the basement floor, she knew she'd never wear it again. That evening, she and Rose stood outside the building, bathed in golden light from the setting sun. Rose held her mom's hand and beamed. "Did you get a new job?" she asked. Lily nodded. "A new beginning." Rose kicked her foot against the sidewalk and smiled. "Told you the printer was crying for a reason." Lily laughed and squeezed her daughter's hand. Yes, yes it was. The days that followed felt surreal to Lily. In just under a week, she had gone from someone who pushed a mop through silent hallways to someone whose name appeared, however briefly, in a company-wide internal memo titled Clarifying Events and Looking Ahead. But fame had never been the goal. In fact, Lily recoiled from it. The attention, though often well-meaning, made her skin itch. People who once brushed past her without eye contact now greeted her with wide smiles or nervous admiration. A few even attempted clumsy small talk in the elevator. It was like she'd been given a new identity overnight, and no one knew quite how to act around her anymore, including Lily herself. She had begun her transitional role in the newly formed internal oversight team, an experimental hybrid of IT, security, and ethics, and was officially listed as a provisional analyst. Her new badge gave her access to areas she used to clean after hours. Now she entered them not to scrub the floor, but to sit in meetings. Real ones, with chairs that faced forward, with people who actually listened when she spoke. She was still adjusting to everything. The tempo of the work, the imposter syndrome that crept in when acronyms flew over her head, the self-doubt that surfaced every time someone called her Miss Gomez instead of Hey. But even on the hardest days, she knew this. She had earned her place, and Jason Cole made sure she never forgot it. He had kept his distance publicly since the crisis, careful not to turn her into a symbol. But privately, he had checked in more than once, briefly, sincerely, to see how she was adjusting. He never patronized, never pushed. He simply acknowledged her as an equal, which for Lily meant more than any headline ever could. One evening, after a long day of onboarding and data audit training, she received a short message from him. "Are you free to meet for 15 minutes? There's something I'd like to show you." The meeting was informal. No agenda, no assistants, no boardroom. Just Jason waiting outside the elevator on the 33rd floor, a floor she hadn't yet visited. He wore no tie that day, just a white shirt with the sleeves casually rolled up, his usual navy blazer slung over one shoulder. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice as even as always. Lily nodded. "Of course. What's on 33? He gave her a small, quiet smile. "Come see." They walked down a short, curved hallway until he paused in front of a set of large double doors made of glass and light wood. He opened them for her and gestured inside. The room was bright, with wide windows stretching from floor to ceiling, giving a panoramic view of the city. But it wasn't the skyline that took Lily's breath away. It was what stood in the center, a small, carefully curated exhibit. On a pedestal under clear glass sat an ordinary sheet of paper, crumpled slightly, a faded signature near the bottom corner. Jason stepped forward and spoke softly. "It's the original report, the one you found. We archived it officially, but I wanted to preserve a copy here, not for the sake of drama, but for remembrance." Lily stared at the display. She recognized the precise folds, the printer smudge on the side, the way the corner had been ripped and taped back together. Beside the display was a brass plaque that read, "Truth found in the quietest places. May we always listen." Her throat tightened. Jason turned to her. "This floor will be our new ethics and integrity center. Internal use only. A space for our team, for future investigators, for conversations that matter. I wanted this to be the first reminder of what vigilance really looks like." Lily didn't know what to say. Her voice felt caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I didn't do it for a plaque." "I know," Jason said, "but symbols matter. And sometimes people need a reason to remember what quiet courage looks like." She nodded slowly. "Still feels like someone else's story. Like I'm just watching." "You lived it," he replied, "which means you get to define what it means." Lily looked back at the paper under the glass, the piece of jammed printer paper that had almost been thrown away. That had been the first spark, the first tear in the curtain. She thought of all the times she had walked these halls unseen, how many invisible lives kept companies like this running, and how, just once, The invisible person had changed everything. I hope they do remember, she said quietly. They will, Jason answered, because people like you don't come around often, and because you didn't just notice something. You acted on it. They stood in silence for a while, looking at the document. The city glowed outside the windows, but inside the room was still sacred almost. Eventually, Jason broke the silence. I've been meaning to ask, why did you take that page with you that day? You didn't know what it meant yet. Lily turned toward him. Because the printer looked like it was crying. Jason chuckled. Not a laugh of mockery, but of genuine appreciation. That's probably the most poetic explanation for corporate whistleblowing I've ever heard. She smiled, then looked once more at the plaque. It didn't say her name. And that felt right. Because it wasn't about her, really. It was about what happens when anyone, decides to pay attention. When they choose not to stay silent just because it's safer. It was about what could happen if the people in the background started asking the questions no one else dared to voice. Even if it was something as simple as, why is the printer crying? The seasons shifted. Spring melted into summer, and with it came new rhythms at Alton Dynamics. Lily still walked the halls of the glass tower, but no longer with a mop in hand or her shoulders slightly hunched. Her gait had changed, not out of arrogance, but quiet ownership. She now carried a laptop bag slung across her chest, a name badge clipped proudly to her blazer. Lily Gomez, Systems Integrity Analyst. She had become a fixture in the new Ethics and Oversight Division, a team that was still finding its structure, but already proving invaluable. People came to her with questions now, not just about security, but about behavior, about judgment, about whether something felt right. She didn't always have the answers, but she always listened. She didn't pretend to know more than she did. She asked the right questions. That, she learned, was sometimes more important than having all the answers. Her days were busy, but full. There was satisfaction in the work. There was challenge too, and sometimes doubt. But she was no longer afraid of it. Outside of work, her life had changed just as profoundly. Rose thrived in her new school, where she devoured science books and sketched out inventions during recess. On weekends, they'd visit bookstores and playgrounds. And sometimes Lily would find herself stopping just to watch her daughter run freely across the grass. Her curls bouncing, her laughter spilling into the air. There were still quiet nights, long ones, where Lily sat alone in her small kitchen after Rose went to sleep, thinking about how far they'd come, how a broken printer and a question had rerouted the entire trajectory of their lives. She'd gone from surviving to building, and that shift was monumental. One warm August morning, she received a calendar notification she hadn't expected. Subject: Leadership Town Hall location, 33rd floor, Integrity Center, Special Recognition L. Gomez, attendance requested. She almost dismissed it as an error. Maybe HR had accidentally added her. But when she checked with the assistant director, the message was confirmed. When she arrived that afternoon, the Integrity Center looked as polished and reverent as ever. The framed printer page was still displayed under glass, its edges now encased in museum-grade UV protection. It had become quietly legendary. The paper that spoke, people joked, but to Lily it was still deeply personal. There were about 60 people in the room, most of them managers, a few directors, and even members of the board. Jason Cole stood near the front, speaking with a group in tailored suits. He caught Lily's eye the moment she stepped in and gave her a small, genuine nod. As the meeting began, Jason took the floor. He spoke calmly, with the same composed precision he was known for. But there was more warmth in him these days, more humanity in his voice. As he updated the company on their continued efforts to improve transparency, restructure systems, and establish long-term oversight, people listened closely. No phones, no side talk. Then his tone changed. I want to close today's session with a reminder, he said, stepping to the center of the room, about vigilance and about the difference one voice can make. He gestured to the exhibit behind him, the printer page, now almost symbolic. Everyone here knows the story, but what you may not fully understand is that the decision to speak up, to challenge silence, is never easy, especially when you've spent most of your life being taught not to interrupt, not to interfere, not to be seen. He turned toward Lily. There is someone in this room who didn't have a title, who wasn't given a seat at the table, who didn't ask for credit or expect anything in return, but who, in a moment of quiet instinct, changed the course of this company forever. The room shifted, all eyes turning to her. Lily felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she didn't flinch. Jason nodded toward her. "Lily, would you join me up here?" She stood slowly, heartbeat thundering, legs steady. She walked to the front, her black flats silent against the floor, every step echoing a version of herself she'd already outgrown. When she reached him, Jason handed her a small black box. She opened it. Inside was a pin. Small, elegant, shaped like a folded sheet of paper with a tiny golden triangle in the corner, engraved with the word, integrity. "There will never be another one like it," he said softly. "You're the first, the benchmark. Everyone else follows your lead." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was thoughtful, sustained, and heartfelt. It came not from admiration for a dramatic act, but for a quiet, courageous one. After the meeting, a few people came to speak with her. Some asked how she'd known what to do. Others simply said thank you. But it was what happened after most had left that stayed with her. Jason approached as she stood once again before the printer page. "You could have walked away," he said. "I almost did," she replied. "But you didn't," he said. "And because of that, you helped me remember why I started this company in the first place." She looked at him. "To build tech?" "No," he said. "To build something that could be better than the people who usually run things. To create space for the unexpected voices, the ones who see what others miss." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Lily smiled, softly but completely. "I didn't save the company," she said. "Just pointed out what no one wanted to look at." Jason smiled too. Sometimes that's exactly what saving looks like. That evening, as she left the building with Rose's hand in hers, she looked up at the glass tower. Not with fear, not with resentment, but with understanding. It wasn't about power or money or prestige. It was about paying attention. And when you do, the world, even a world built to ignore you, can no longer look away. To me, the ending of this story isn't just satisfying, it's quietly powerful. It doesn't rely on dramatic explosions or over-the-top twists. Instead, it's rooted in something far more meaningful: recognition. Lily doesn't end up rich or famous. She doesn't marry the CEO. She doesn't suddenly become someone else. She becomes fully herself, visible, respected, and empowered. And that, in a world that often overlooks people like her, is revolutionary in its own right. What struck me most was how small moments, a jammed printer, a question asked, a decision not to stay silent, could echo so loudly. It's a reminder that real change doesn't always come from titles or top-floor decisions. Sometimes it begins with someone no one notices doing something no one expects. The story closes with quiet hope, that integrity still matters, that courage doesn't always roar, and that in the right moment, even a single act of attention can shift the balance of power. And to me, that's not just a happy ending, it's the right one.